Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus and welcome to another analysis video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. On the agenda tonight, we're going to be looking at Carlos Santana, and this is going to be coming from 1969, the famous Woodstock performance of Soul Sacrifice. So let's get Carlos up on screen and see how he gets on. I'm just going to jump in here because it's probably going to be a good move with the whole crazy copyright thing as well. But I want to jump in because a lot of people will know this particular performance for the stories that go with it, in terms of, if you haven't heard the story, about the band pretty much getting high before they came up on stage because they were told to get up on stage a lot earlier than they were expecting. Of course, people will say that it was just one of those performances where they were all on the same page, and maybe because of other influences that's why it was so great. But there has got to be fundamental musical elements that come together in order to make this so interesting and to make it a standout performance. And that is what we're going to be looking at. I'm going to be analysing it and giving you timestamps to look out for these changes, because throughout this whole 6 minutes 16 of this video, there is nothing in there that is boring or anything that you would change. And if you go all the way back to the beginning of the video, you'll see how low we start dynamically. It's something that I mentioned in all my videos with all the top bands, how they really do vary the dynamics of what they're playing. They'll either start all out and then bring it down, or they'll start down and then bring everything in, which is exactly what we do here. So the whole intro is really setting the scene for Santana to come in with his lead guitar. And once his lead guitar comes in, that is the main voice. That's like the vocalist. So the scene has been set for the main attraction, which is that lead guitar. And then Santana comes in and he starts playing some great call and response lines. So when we get to 50 seconds in the video, Santana's asking those musical questions with his guitar. guitar, and he has 4 questions and he has 4 answers. And the great thing about the way that it's been put together is that the last answer out of those 8 is resolved, which means that he's going to the note of the key that he's in terms of the root note. So it means that it is like a full stop in your lead playing, and it just means that that conversation has happened and now there's a full stop. And the reason that there's a full stop is because then Carlos is going to be starting another set of questions, and it's amazing to look out for because he looks over to the organ player and he kind of says with his eyes, are you going to answer some of these questions? And sure enough, the organ comes in and starts answering those. I know that I'm looking at this in detail, but all of these things will go into your subconscious. Even if you're not musical, your brain will still find it interesting because it's different all the time. So after all this musical interaction that we've had, at 2 minutes, we now have a change in dynamic. And this is where we bring everything down into a percussive solo, effectively, where gradually more and more percussive elements are added. And look out for Carlos with his cowbell as well. And in order for it to be an absolutely standout performance, you've got to have a cowbell in there somewhere, and Carlos absolutely knows that. And the reason that this percussive section is so interesting is because everyone in this band is absolutely on the same page, in the same groove, but they are accenting different beats. So it means that they're not all coming in on 1, 2, 3, and 4. If it didn't have those elements, again, exactly the same as the guitar and the keys, it would get boring if it's just the same thing over and over again, but it's always being changed up. We're going to be getting back into the video now, but by the way, 2 minutes and 32 seconds, and it's been absolutely breathless all the way so far. Look out for the dynamic change at 3 minutes and 8 seconds, because then everything's going to be coming back in, but let's get back into it. And there we have it. And that whole performance, when we talk about tight, in terms of just the band in general, obviously that bass and the drums have got to be absolutely in the pocket together all the time. They absolutely are. And the great thing about this performance and why it works so well is because Santana is one of those players that goes with his feeling rather than being one of those guys that is really preoccupied almost with the technical elements and in terms of getting down runs really precisely and just getting down a set solo that they might have learned and nail it live and then, oh, it's great, you played all the notes correctly, but there wasn't really any feeling in it. And in this performance, absolutely pushing his playing to the edge and letting go with the playing. That's the most important thing, that once you've got a performance like this where everybody is letting go, that's the point. And I always say that the top players can push their playing right to the edge but never fall off the cliff. And at the edge is where all the exciting stuff happens. You'll never be able to explain it until the ends of time what this kind of performance has about it. It just has something. And for me, it is just when you have that combination of elements of everyone being a top musician, but everyone playing how they're feeling at the time and pushing everything to the limit. Where we had at 3 minutes 23, we got into that organ solo, and then Santana came in and started playing some of those lead lines but harmonizing, so it wasn't like taking over because now the organ is that main voice. It's almost like the spotlight has moved on the stage to another instrument, and it's obviously going to be more interesting. If you imagine you're just looking at one thing for 6 minutes, it's going to become boring, whereas if you're given something to look at and then somebody then takes your attention away and you look at something else, you're going to be more interested because something different's going on. This is exactly what's happening instrumentally here, is that we've got that focus straight away on percussion, and then the guitar comes in, that shifts the focus. Then Santana's asking questions to the keys are then responding. We then have a shift to now lots of different percussive elements. Then we have a shift to a drum solo. Then we're now looking at the keys because that's now on the organ, that main voice. Santana is supplying a harmony line, and then Santana takes over as the main voice now in the band after that organ solo. So it's always shifting. And this is a band full of instrumentalists who are absolutely playing their part without overstepping the boundary. Because you can imagine that if you had a band with this many people in it and they all wanted to show off or they all wanted to be louder than the other player, it would just be a cacophony of noise. And more importantly, the kind of subtlety and change in dynamics that we're seeing here just wouldn't be possible. The reason this works is because every player is disciplined enough to play their part for that overall good of the composition and the performance. And 5 minutes and 6 seconds, look out for the way that Carlos has now really taken that tone back, rolled off the volume to give a different sound, to bring that dynamic down. And you'll be able to see throughout this video the way that Carlos just absolutely tweaks that tone all the time, especially just adding a little bit more and more volume to open up that tone into that more overdriven sound, and then really rolling it back like we can see in 5 minutes and 6 seconds, like I just mentioned, just bringing it back to that cleaner lead tone. And then at 5 minutes and 11 seconds, we have that total change where everybody now is playing straight in that groove rather than the rest of the track. Up until that point, we had so many different accents going on, so many different emphasis points percussion wise, and just changing it up to now totally straight. It's gonna have such a dramatic effect because everything else has been so all over the place with all of those accents. Obviously, when I say all over the place, I don't mean that we're out of time. And to end it all, we have this really cool, pre-worked out, tight ending. And sometimes you can have a great performance that is let down by the ending, because sometimes you'll get a band who have just the drummer hitting cymbals and then hitting the foot pedal, and the guitarist will be strumming chords, but then they haven't worked out when they're going to finish. So then the drummer stops and the guitarist didn't stop, but then he lets it kind of just stop with a palm mute, and it's really messy. But here we've got the perfect ending to the perfect performance because it is tight, and everything about this whole performance has been tight. All these great technical elements that are coming together, the subtlety of all the changes, once you pair that with just emotion and expression. It is an unbeatable combination, and that's why these kind of performances just stand out, because there's something in there that you can't put your finger on, and that is the emotion of it, because emotion isn't something that you can read about in a textbook of how to play the guitar or how to play any instrument. There isn't a chapter on that, and emotion is always going to be the thing that makes the difference, and it will do for all eternity in music, but in any art form. When it's got an expression and an emotion and it makes you feel something, that will make it stand out. Even if you get two players are playing exactly the same piece, but one of them puts emotion into it, you can't say what they've done to make it different, but it puts it above another performance which might just come across as flat. But an absolute classic video to have a look at here, a really interesting one to look through as well. But thank you so much for suggesting this video for me to take a look at, and keep those suggestions coming in the comments below. Let me know what you guys think, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!